All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL DFS video. Going to be breaking down week 12 here for you guys, giving you guys my core plays, the first look build, some potential values that we can be on. There are a lot of injury spots to break down, and so let's go ahead and get into it. And so running back wise, we are getting a lot of potentially good spots, starting with Josh Jacobs potentially sitting in this game. He did get injured in that game against the Giants. He does seem to have avoided any serious injury, but the play that we're going to be getting to a bunch if he ends up sitting is going to be Emmanuel Wilson. Wilson ended up scoring a touchdown that game, getting 40 yards rushing as well, able to score around 14 DFS points there. The key thing is that he ended up playing 70% of the snaps in that game, which is obviously huge. And so if he's going to be the running back that, goes into that Josh Jacobs role, that's going to be a valuable spot for us. Now, overall, I think this is actually going to help Jordan Love the most, where he's just going to have to throw the football more, maybe a little bit more red zone looks for him as well. But Emmanuel Wilson at this price tag is just clearly too cheap and clearly going to be the correct click. That being said, we will see a little bit of Chris Brooks, but overall, Wilson's going to be the player that we want. Now, another running back situation that we need to monitor is Jaylen Warren. He got injured in the last game for the Steelers against the Bengals. He seems to be good to go. He kind of indicated that he could have come back into the game if it was a close game. But obviously, if he ends up sitting, you never know how a player is going to feel after having some time off. Maybe it ends up being a bigger injury than they might have thought. Kenneth Gainwell would end up being the player that we'd want to get to. He played in 64% of the snaps, whereas the backup running back then, Johnson, only played 7 snaps total. So it definitely would be Kenneth Gainwell that we'd be looking at the most. I do expect Warren to play, though, so we're not looking at that spot too much. Another player that we were on a decent amount last week as kind of like a GPP upside play, didn't come through for us because Jordan Mason was the one that scored a touchdown, though, was Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is going to be going against his former team, the Green Bay Packers. He's gotten 70% of the snaps 2 weeks ago, and then last week, guys, ended up with 67% of the snaps. So he is basically getting a workhorse workload, ended up getting 6 targets the last 2 games as well. If we could convert those all into catches, obviously that's a much better day for him. He could potentially go off at a lower price tag in a little bit of a revenge game spot, although it's 2 seasons removed from that. Do we necessarily consider that a revenge game? I typically don't. Another play that we need to talk about is going to be Bijan Robinson. So this play is very much twofold, okay? Drake London is out most likely in this game, and so I think that's going to lead to really, obviously, Bijan Robinson just being the focal point of this offense. That being said, Michael Penix is also going to be out as well, so we're going to see Kirk Cousins. And why is that important? Well, Kirk Cousins was at QB for one of the worst bust spots in DFS this whole season, where we had Robinson going against Miami, just an ideal matchup, where he only put up 6.8 DFS points. So that's a little bit concerning, but as it sits right now, I am definitely going out of my way to target Bijan Robinson. And then another spot that we need to monitor, might not end up mattering, would be Rhamondre Stevenson. Okay, Travion Henderson has played so well that it might be tough to go back to Stevenson as the true RB1. It could end up finally being more of a 50-50 split. Obviously, if Stevenson does end up sitting, we are just going to be looking at Travion Henderson a bunch in this matchup here against the Cincinnati Bengals, which is the best matchup now. 2 straight dominant performances there by Travion Henderson, and he's just looked good doing it, okay? And you finally give him a very good matchup, you would expect him to be able to exploit that pretty well. So we could end up getting some pretty darn good spots at the running back position for this week. But 2 other ones that I think are worthwhile, guys, Kareem Hunt could end up being in a very good spot as well if Pacheco ends up sitting. Hunt ended up getting 80% of the work. He is very much a touchdown dependent play, but he's too cheap. He's too cheap if he ends up playing 80% of the snaps. He could easily give us 15 to 17 DFS points in this game. This does end up being a better matchup for him as well. And then just for what it's worth, guys, Kenneth Walker, too cheap of a price tag. I know he's only playing about 50% of the snaps, but still, that was enough for him in the last game. It just feels like he's due for some kind of explosion games here where he just starts to go off. So very cheap price tag for him there as well. Now, there are some other spots we could get into, like Chase Brown will probably be the focal point of this offense with Jamar Chase being suspended. It's just not the best matchup, and so that is a little bit concerning, but he should end up playing about 80% of the snaps. So kind of an interesting spot there as well. And then we do have Barkley going against Dallas. You would expect him to have a better game in that game against them as well. First game of the year, guys, had 18.4 DFS points against them. Not a terrible spot. And then receiver-wise, so we are probably just trying to look to pay up for JSN. He's been super reliable. He gets a fine matchup there against the Tennessee Titans. He is priced up a bit to the point where we have to think about it. CeeDee Lamb is too cheap, I would say, as well, guys. CeeDee Lamb, I'm recording this video during Monday Night Football as well. He has a touchdown in that game. this could end up being a decent spot there against the Eagles as well. I think it is, but he's sandwiched in between St. Brown, who gets a very good matchup against the Giants, guys. The Giants have been very defeatable against the pass, okay? Even in the game against the Green Bay Packers, where the Green Bay Packers had like 6 drops, like legitimate drops. Like that game, Jordan Love played such a good game in that game, and whether it was dropping INTs, there was like 4 of those from Winston, or dropping throws from Jordan Love, the receivers dropping throws from Jordan Love, they managed to keep the Giants close. But that defense is definitely defeatable via the air game, and I do expect the Lions to be able to snap back. And so ASB is certainly going to be appealing there. Ended up with 12 targets in that game still, so that's crazy. And then you have Rashid Rice, almost scored a touchdown last week as well. He actually kind of had himself a bad game, kind of a couple drops on his part. If you convert those, he ends up having a much better day as well. I kind of think at his price tag, he's probably the one we want to get to the most, but I don't know if we necessarily need to do that. Okay, we could potentially be getting Stephon Diggs to be looking like he's a good play. We need to see whether or not Booty plays, because that really would impact Diggs in the sense that Diggs played his most snaps of the year last week, guys, playing 72% of the snaps. Now, he's been playing a lot of the routes already, so overall it doesn't matter, but we did see him become much more of a focal point in that game last week. 11 targets, 9 receptions, and again, played 72% of the snaps. So he would end up being a much more appealing play if Booty does end up sitting. On top of that, we do have T. Higgins now in that game with Jamar Chase out, that he's going to end up looking pretty darn appealing. And then Darnell Mooney as well, guys. Darnell Mooney without Drake London. Obviously, we got to be looking at him. 7 targets last week, 8 targets the week before that. The quarterback that's been able to get him going from a fantasy perspective has been Kirk Cousins throughout his career. So obviously that's just last week, but his best performances and production was sparked by Kirk Cousins at QB. So this could actually end up being a very good thing for him. And he definitely ends up being a little bit too low price now, being the receiver number 1 for that team as well. And then Christian Watson, we can't really ignore his performance last week, guys. It felt like he broke out again. A tough matchup there against Minnesota, but there are going to be a couple deep shots there for Christian Watson, and you kind of expect him to make them. Obviously, ends up scoring 2 touchdowns. And again, with Josh Jacobs out, I kind of feel like it's going to be more of a pass-heavy approach there for the Green Bay Packers, although obviously we are getting to Emmanuel Wilson still at that price tag. And then Michael Wilson, who ended up becoming a core value play for me as the week progressed, just because he was too cheap. He did get priced up a little bit, but I mean, 18 targets, 15, really had an awesome game. Obviously, you wouldn't expect that again, but I do think he could end up giving us around 15 DFS points in this game against the Jaguars, who maybe this game ends up being a little bit of a shootout. I do kind of like Jacoby Myers in the spot as well, guys. Jacoby Myers ended up playing 65% of the snaps, and maybe if he ends up getting to, let's say, 75%, he's going to end up looking even more appealing. He's certainly too cheap as well. 6 targets in that game, again, getting 65% of the snaps, 5 receptions. That I like. I mean, that just seems like a pricing error. We also have John Mechie here as well, guys. John Mechie ended up playing 82% of the snaps there, basically operating as the Jets QB1. He gets a decent quarterback upgrade as well, with Tyrod Taylor confirmed to be starting here. This is not a bad matchup against Baltimore. Now, they have been a little bit better recently, but if we can get Mechie again, 5 targets, maybe 40 air yards for us at 3.3 on DraftKings, obviously that's going to be very, very appealing. And then it is worth mentioning, we got Kyle Williams as well. If we get news that, again, Keyshawn Boutte is going to end up sitting, Kyle Williams for the Patriots is a little bit appealing as well. He ended up playing 70% of the snaps. He should just be priced up like $400 to $500 more. And that seemed to be one of the bigger pricing errors, although that one might not matter as much just because, well, the Patriots might not have to throw the football all that much. And then, guys, kind of unfortunately, this week kind of feels a little bit like last week, where I think we just are kind of just paying up. Like Trey McBride just is like the clear-cut obvious choice, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr. Still out, and he gets a great matchup there against the Jacksonville Jaguars. 11 targets, 13 targets the last 2 weeks. I think we should just be clicking on him. It just feels as simple as that. Now, we could potentially look at some other ones. Hunter Henry in a very good spot. Like, I don't hate that. Harold Fandon played a decent amount of snaps. AJ Barner, getting targeted pretty heavily last week. We can't really ignore that. 11 targets there, guys, 10 receptions. Like, he's a little bit too cheap, but for me, everyone is basically priced correctly. I don't think there's that many pricing mistakes. Now, Johnny Munn, maybe he's valuable with the starting tight ends for the Jaguars being out again, but we got to wait and see on that. And so for me right now, I think it's just we are just paying up for Trey McBride, and then we can kind of see what we need to do from there. So quarterback wise, it's tough to go away from Jacoby Brissett. This is going to be like the third, maybe fourth straight week for us now being on Jacoby Brissett, and I apologize for that, but I can't control the pricing, guys. Priced at 5.3, still not enough. So guys, 5 straight games of over 20 DFS points, and he gets a good matchup here against the Jaguars. Now, sure, you could argue the Chargers were just terrible against them, okay, and I would say that's a fine argument, but the Chargers just didn't have any time to throw the football. And you look at the Cardinals, guys, they might have lost Amari DiMercato as well, and this could end up being a game where they're playing from behind against the Jaguars. Jaguars offense doesn't inspire all that much confidence in that, but overall, I think Jacoby Brissett actually ends up being one of the better values on the slate again. Now, quarterback wise, we are getting Drake May in a good spot there against the Bengals. I don't mind that. Obviously, Jalen Hurts against the Cowboys, we can't ignore that. Jared Goff, bounce back spot against the Giants. You would expect him to play well, but I do want to mention Jordan Love. So Jordan Love, it's tough to really describe how well he played because people are going to see the box score and see 174 passing yards and only 2 TDs and be like, what are you talking about? And even if you watch the highlights, it doesn't really do it justice. Like, this was probably the second best game of his career. And again, it sounds crazy to say if you guys didn't see it and if you only just watch the highlights. The position that he was put in that game, where he left the game with an injury, ended up coming back into the game. When he did, he had receivers just making mistakes, classic stuff, or bad penalties at bad times. And the way he kept continuously getting the team out of third downs, fourth downs, converting on those. And the way he was able to convert on those, where he's waiting until the last second, throwing off his back foot and just throwing the perfect pass and completing it. You'll see it on the Christian Watson touchdown if you watch that, but that was the whole game, and it was just very good. Now, the flip side of that is that he had to throw as many perfect passes as he did because the receivers weren't getting open. So that's a whole nother thing. There were 6 drops, though, in that game, and that is something you do expect to get corrected. And it's just, with Jacobs being out, it wouldn't surprise me if he finally gets some red zone touchdowns more so, okay? Just going back over the takes, you guys know the first year that Jordan Love was starting, I was really hyping him up. I did not understand his ADPs. Best ball drafts, I was telling you guys to be on him. Basically, every single week we bet his over fantasy score for like props betting. He got the over basically every single week but 2. And then last year with Josh Jacobs being there, I'm like, okay, we might actually want to look at Josh Jacobs over rushing touchdowns and Jordan Love for under his passing touchdowns because, well, I thought they brought in Josh Jacobs to alleviate some of that red zone pressure on Jordan Love. So in summary, I do think we can expect a little bit more red zone work out of Love there. So don't mind that. Caleb Williams finally had himself a bad game against the Vikings. No touchdowns for him in that game. Still, I think it's just Caleb Williams' experience right now. I think every single week we're going to be looking at him as some sort of GPP flyer. Like, we don't need to go crazy with him, but we do want our exposure to him. And then, yeah, we do need to call out Kirk Cousins. I know it hasn't been great, but 4.4. I don't know, guys. Like, yeah, that's actually tough. He would, it'd almost be like you'd want to play Robinson with Kirk Cousins and hope that Robinson scores a touchdown. Yeah, I actually don't think we can get to Cousins there. It's a little bit ugly. He just hasn't looked good. Some people are going to be tempted in playing Shedeur Sanders if he's actually starting in this game. And I could potentially get behind that just because he could end up rushing the football. We know how valuable, rushing is for quarterbacks. Heck, maybe even gives us a rushing touchdown. Obviously, it wasn't pretty throwing the football. This should be a little bit of a better matchup against the Raiders than it was that's not true. Baltimore's been pretty bad. So yeah, it's too cheap, right? Yeah, I don't mind chasing the rushing upside. I do worry that he could end up a little bit too much hype. Like, if he gets over 7% ownership, if he ends up starting, like, that would end up being too high for me. So he'd only be like a low owned upside play that I'd want to get to again, where you're chasing production from his legs mostly. And then finally, guys, going ahead and get into the DST, I would say the one that we want to pay for is going to be the Browns going against the Raiders. Again, I'm recording this video through Monday Night Football. Right now, Geno Smith is continuing to look like Geno Smith, which is really bad. Okay. And so I think Geno Smith's still playing bad. So, like, the Browns are the DST that we want to be getting to. But that being said, I don't mind punting. Last week I told you guys we're probably just punting to the Titans DST. They end up being solid for us. I think we could actually get away with the Jets DST. Again, the whole point of this is trying to find a DST that's not going to go negative. The lowest price DST that's not going to go negative. I do think that's going to end up being the Jets. Although that being said, I think we could potentially get to the Titans, maybe the Colts, but I think we could end up paying up for the Browns here. And so the first look build that I actually came up with here, guys, was kind of just punting to some of those receiver values that we were getting and kind of going with more of a fair and balanced build. Now, maybe I get off of Robinson as the week progresses, but for now, I think this ends up being a pretty good build. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. I appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you guys have not done so before. That does help out a bunch. Trying to get this channel going. So I had to start an NFL DFS channel or a DFS channel because, well, for whatever reason, props and NFL DFS does not coincide with the YouTube algorithm. So show out some love, guys. I would appreciate that. Thanks for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.